Welcome everyone to this bonus episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast, where we speak to interesting and knowledgeable people about how best to protect sentient beings from the harms of coming into existence. I'm your host, John, an antinatalist advocate from the UK, and I'll be the main host of the podcast going forward. This is a very quick episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast. Basically, Lawrence, who you guys probably know well by now, gave an update on his YouTube channel about antinatalist advocacy and with a specific focus on our conference in December, which we are super excited for. So if you haven't already, please do mark that in your calendar. It'll be the 2nd and 3rd of December for free on our YouTube channel, but more details to follow in the episode. So yeah, just a very quick one today. Hope you do enjoy it, and do us a favour by sharing far and wide as well. Before we get to the episode, I did have a couple of rambling thoughts on antinatalism that I thought it might be good to share. In the very first episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast, where we were introducing AA as an organisation, I mentioned that although it's maybe a slightly cheesy view, I do believe that antinatalism is a philosophy of love and compassion. As you can see from our logo, where we have the heart breaking the infinity sign, we are really trying to bring across that compassionate side of antinatalism. I think my actions over the past few weeks maybe haven't necessarily aligned with that. As you can imagine, as we are starting to build traction, a bit of momentum with AA, we are encountering some criticism, which is totally fair. At times, I guess I haven't always responded to that criticism in as compassionate a way as I would have wanted to. So this is just a reminder really for me as much as anyone else that we do have a very compassionate philosophy on our side, and I think that we should communicate our antinatalist message with compassion in our hearts, as cheesy as that sounds. Anyway, without further ado, I bring you this bonus episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast with my good friend Lawrence Anton. Enjoy.
In this video, I wanted to talk about antinatalist advocacy, which I'm not sure actually how much I've spoken about directly on this channel. I've spoken about it a lot elsewhere, but I can't think of how much I've spoken about it right here on this channel. So for anyone that doesn't know, Antinatalist Advocacy is a fairly new organization that myself and John, who has been on the channel before, have put together, and it's been around publicly for a few months now. And I wanted to do two things with this video. One, actually just make a video on my channel directly about antinatalist advocacy. But second of all, I got on a call with John recently, which will be interspersed in this video, hoping to give people an update on what we've been doing and what's to come. So if you want to get a more comprehensive view of the ideas and motivations behind antinatalist advocacy, I'd recommend watching this video, which is John and I's first conversation on this channel, where we talk about the crossover between effective altruism and antinatalism. Now, this video isn't really about covering the basics of antinatalist advocacy, although I will do a quick overview. What it's more is an update on what we've been doing and also what you can expect in the future, and a big announcement about the conference that we've got coming up. So very quickly, before we get into all of that, what is antinatalist advocacy? Well, it's a new organization that John and I have put together, in which we want to bring together antinatalism and the ideas of effective altruism to do good in the world. Now, there are 4 cause areas that we identified that we want to focus on, and you can find more about those in the conversation that I referenced before. A link will be in the description. But those are human procreation, animal agriculture, wild animal suffering, and artificial sentience. And how we're going to go about creating change and also helping facilitate others create change as well can be broken down into 6 main categories. The first one is that we want to disseminate information. So we have the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast, where we disseminate different ideas and talk to different people, which have a bunch of resources on our website. We want to increase the amount of networking opportunities within the antinatalist community, but also between the antinatalist community and other communities. We want to support individual people to realize their potential for doing good in the world, specifically antinatalists or people who want to use antinatalism to do good in the world. And we also want to support other organizations as well, as people start to build organizations, as I'm sure more people will in the antinatalist space. We want to help support other organizations to realize their potential as well. We want to help with aspects of community building in the antinatalist community, helping it become a healthier community, a more cohesive community. And finally, we want to help conduct research and facilitate research into antinatalism, forms of antinatalist advocacy, and the antinatalist community. So that's a quick overview of what antinatalist advocacy is and what we want to do. And now I'm going to hand over to me and John to talk about what we've done so far and what we've got planned for the future.
I think we were kind of like, I've definitely as a person been caught up in analysis paralysis in the past. But one thing that you were really good at, Lawrence, was having an approach of, all right, we need to do stuff. Or we need to get things on paper. Like, we can plan it all out perfectly, but we need to make a bit of a splash, give people something to kind of show what we're doing. And we will not quite figure it out as we go along, but we will definitely develop we will find direction through doing stuff. Whereas I was, especially at the beginning, quite cautious in terms of let's map everything out and let's do. So I think that we reached a nice kind of middle ground of identifying some core projects that we knew we could both do. It's worth saying that both of us obviously work full time, so this is all a voluntary endeavor at the moment. Projects that we could really deliver that would put AA on the map, and also, most importantly, have something of real value to the antinatalist community and beyond that as well. Just in general, people are looking to do good in the world. So the first thing that we decided, we noticed that when I went on Spotify and looked for podcasts on antinatalism, there was a grand total of one. The really excellent Exploring Antinatalism podcast with Amanda Zuknik. If you haven't listened to that, then please do check this out. Although by now, I imagine quite a few people in the antinatalist community have definitely come across that at least once. And we thought that, especially in this early stage where we had all of these ideas around the cause areas, starting a podcast would be something to help us get the word out there. So we've launched the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast. We've started with monthly episodes. So the first one coming out in July, and then we obviously had 2 more in August and September. It's now September the 27th that we're recording this video. And we feel like we've kind of ironed out the creases to some extent with this podcast. So we're now being ambitious and going for 2 episodes a month from this point going forward. So yeah, very much at this stage, getting ideas out there, who we are, the kind of ideas that we're interested in. So we had very much an introductory episode to AA as an organisation, briefly touched on the 4 cause areas. And then we've also had introductions to antinatalism and effective altruism as both philosophies and communities, because these are the core ideas and the communities that we're looking to kind of bring together, if you like, through AA. The idea of applying an impact-focused approach to antinatalist activism and supporting people who are trying to do good in the world, whether they identify as antinatalists or not. Through our approach. So 3 episodes in, we've obviously, the first one was mostly internal. We had on, again, the wonderful Amanda from Exploring Antinatalism and a whole other bunch of projects. That was our first full episode. And we also spoke with vegan space scientist, YouTuber, antinatalist, researcher at the Sentience Institute to talk about effective altruism and antinatalism as well. Genuinely, I'm really happy with where we are. I think that we have slowly and steadily built momentum. And I'm now, of course, like we have big ambitions for antinatalist advocacy. But did I think, for example, that the podcast would reach number one on Spotify with 1 million downloads in the first month? Of course not. Like we are, quite modest numbers on the podcast so far. But yeah, I think if you'd have said to me a year ago, this is where we would be, we'd have these 2 projects, we would have the website, and most importantly, we'd have as much buy-in from the people who have very kindly given up their time for free, by the way. Like, this has all been with no cash injections at all, other than, like, I think me and Lawrence have split a few £3 a month subscriptions to different software. Yeah. But yeah, people have been really generous with their time, with the conference, with the podcast. Obviously, our former team member Alana as well, who's since pulled away from AA in general. She was really generous with her time too. So, yeah, feeling very grateful and really happy with where we are now. We're only 3 months in. I don't think I mentioned, but I don't know if I did, but we officially launched on July the 1st after about 8 months or so of planning.
Prep work, yeah.
And yeah, we've definitely got big plans going forward, and I feel like we're in a good spot. What do you reckon, Lawrence?
Yeah, I think like these are the way I see this period is like these are the early days where
definitely
we're sort of basically trying to prove ourselves, I think. Because I think, well, there are a couple of ways we're trying to prove ourselves. So the first way is we're trying to prove ourselves to other antinatalists, because I think there's still a lot of reservation in the antinatalist community for organizing and
activism and being public about this stuff. Understandably too. Totally understandably.
Yeah. So I think we're trying to prove ourselves to them in that, we're serious with what we want to do, and we're willing to put the effort in, and we want to be able to show the results of that effort. So, with the podcast and the conference and stuff. We also want to put our, name on the map as well for just the wider community of doing good. So once we have done something like the conference and we've got a few more episodes of the podcast under our belt, we will have a body of work that we can refer people to.
Definitely.
And, people in the EA community, but also just generally people in, whatever community that seeks to do good. And also I think it'll mean that the more we can prove ourselves, the more opportunities we'll be able to get as well. So people will take us in a more serious way, and that means that we will have opportunities open up to us that will allow us to do even more good that aren't open to us at the moment. So I see this really as the sort of laying the groundwork and proving yourself phase. And yeah, so far we've just been, getting on with it. And I think it's been going fine. I mean, obviously there's been, hiccups here and there. Not everything's gone perfectly, but I mean, if anyone has an expectation for something like this to go perfectly when you're just starting out, you're living in la la land, So and also an imperfect sort of journey helps to, build your knowledge and wisdom and understanding and skill set and problem solving ability. So in the long run, it hopefully will serve us even better that there's been some rough moments even with the smooth.
Definitely. And I think, as you're saying, we've been learning as we've been going. The first podcast episode that we recorded, I forgot to stand in front of the microphone. I didn't add timestamps. I didn't get everything I wanted in the description. So there's bound to be some general kind of teething problems. And hopefully, the things that we produce will just keep getting slightly better as we go. But yeah, no major problems that would seriously derail us at this stage, which is good.
What are you? Well, first of all, two kind of questions. What have we got coming up in the future as ideas, and what are you most looking forward to? So, obviously, at the moment, we're focusing on the podcast and the conference, but people, are listening to us and hearing us say, we've got big ideas, and we want to hopefully be able to do a lot of good for the antinatalist community, but also just in general in the world. And they might be thinking like, well, what does that look like? What sort of ideas and initiatives like may AA be getting up to in the future, without revealing too much?
Definitely. If I start with the podcast, so we've got several series planned. We've just started our first series now, which is responding to the effective altruist community on antinatalism. And the first episode will be coming out on October the 15th. If you're watching this and it's after October the 15th, please go and find it. And if it's before October the 15th, then keep your eyes peeled. And then we have another series, planned next year, which will be deep dives on each of the 4 cause areas. So why we should care about human procreation, animal agriculture, wild animal suffering, and artificial sentience. We have some guests in mind for each of the topics, as well as some opposing voices too. We don't want to reveal too much at this stage, but yeah, quite big plans with the podcast. I think we're viewing this first year very much as laying the groundwork, so kind of like July to July, getting the ideas out there, covering our bases there, and then the year afterwards really looking to empower people to take action that has a really positive impact in the world. So those are the plans for the podcast. Sorry for being a bit vague at the moment, but you'll find out more in due course. Please do subscribe, follow the podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And then outside of the podcast, we have, and again, more will be coming out about this, but we have identified 5 steps for having impact as an antinatalist. And I won't reveal what those are just yet, because we are definitely looking to get feedback on those. But we're looking to produce like a step-by-step guide with a ton of resources and support for people who are looking to have an impact. So not just sharing ideas like we are with the podcast, but really looking to empower people to take action. And then we have a very big project planned next year, which for me sounds even more daunting than the conference. But I don't want to reveal too much just yet, Lawrence. Sorry for being cagey. But yeah, really looking forward to getting our teeth into that.
So that was a bit about how things have gone so far, and also some of the ideas we've got for the future and some of the plans we have for the future. And now I want to hand back over to me and John to talk about the conference that's coming up, which is super exciting. Now, very quickly before I hand over, if you want to stay up to date with things on the conference, you want to subscribe to the Antinatalist Advocacy YouTube channel, which I will link in the description. You want to sign up to the newsletter, and you want to follow us on Twitter, or X as it's now called. If you do all those things, you will not miss an update about the conference. But anyway, I'm super excited about the conference. It's happening very soon, and I'll hand over to me and John to talk about it more. But the conference, it's been mentioned in a few of the videos we've been in, and it is listed on the website. But apart from that, there's been no updates about it. And it's because we've been working in the background to bring it to fruition, basically. Now, I'm not sure exactly when this video will be posted. So the first announcement may have been made already. But basically, from the 2nd of October onwards, we will be releasing updates and announcements about the conference. So it's called the Antinatalist Advocacy Conference 2023, Antinatalism at a Crossroads. So the idea we had behind the conference was that we wanted to bring together people who have a wealth of knowledge around antinatalism and the different cause areas that we've identified, the 4 cause areas. Now, personally, I think we've actually done really well to be able to get the people that we've got. So we've got I'm not gonna give too many details now, because I want the details to come out in the announcements that we're going to be doing over October and November. But just to give people a few details, we have 1 panel and we have 5 separate speaker sessions. Now, the conference is going to be taking place over 2 days. It's all online. It's all completely free, so anyone can attend. It's going to be over the first weekend of December, which is the 2nd and 3rd of December. And what we've tried to do is split it into 2 half days. So there's going to be 1 half day on Saturday, 1 half day on Sunday. We're hoping that by us splitting the times, one of them is going to be slightly earlier, one of them is going to be slightly later in the day in London. And so what we're hoping is the one earlier in the day will mean that people in the Eastern Hemisphere, places like India, Australia, Japan, it won't be insanely late for them and they can tune in live. But everything will be available for catch-up anyway. And then the later one will mean that it's not in the very early morning for people in the Western Hemisphere, like in South America and North America. So we're hoping that's going to work. But yeah, we've got a range of people coming on, which I think are going to be really exciting to talk to. And yeah, I don't want to give too much away, basically, because everything's going to be coming out in the next 2 months. But suffice to say, it's a free 2-day conference where you're going to get a whole load of different topics, all related to antinatalism, with some, really intelligent and thoughtful people giving talks. And what we're planning for it to be at the moment is the conference will have so it's not just going to be this one conference, it'll have iterations, and we're looking at doing them every other year at this point. Is the sort of aim we've got at the moment, is to do a conference every other year. For the foreseeable future, it will likely be virtual. Definitely. But it may have an in-person element at some point. And each iteration will focus on a different, aspect of antinatalism and antinatalist advocacy. So with this one, like I said before, it's the subtitle of it is Antinatalism at a Crossroads, but and that's to, I guess, essentially encapsulate the fact that the antinatalist community at the moment is very much at a stage where its advocacy is budding. There have been several instances of antinatalist activism and advocacy in the past and in the present, and there seems to be more and more groups popping up doing antinatalist advocacy, but it's by no means fully developed. It's very much in its infant stages, and so we kind of see the community as at a crossroads in terms of what do we want to make the dominant mindset and dominant form of activism or advocacy when it comes to putting antinatalism out there and trying to make change in the world. And we want people to have as many perspectives and pieces of information at their disposal so that they can consider them all when they go into doing advocacy themselves. So that's really the idea of the conference, is that we want to have conversations and talks and panels with a range of different people on a range of different topics, all centered around how can we do good in the world with antinatalism in mind.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Antinatalist Advocacy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. We would also be really grateful if you could help us get the word out there by sharing this episode far and wide, as well as giving us a positive rating on whichever platform you're listening to us on. To find out more about AA, including careers advice, donation recommendations, and different ways to have a positive impact, you can go to our website at antinatalistadvocacy.org. To keep up to date with what we're up to, feel free to subscribe to our monthly newsletter and follow us on your favourite social media platforms. Links to all of the above are in the description. As always, we are hoping you will join us in our antinatalist advocacy.